I'm Donovan, and I am a product designer. I design things for the web, and I'm focused on music. So I led design at Last.fm for like almost 5 years, which is kind of a really long time. And now I'm working on a brand new music service called This Is My Jam, and it's so I'm going to tell you about my project today. And it's still pretty new, so in terms of the learnings and stuff that we've discovered that hasn't worked and has worked yet, there hasn't been a whole lot of that yet. So what I thought I'd do is first talk to you just about some of the problems and opportunities that myself and the rest of the team were seeing in the online music space, and then from that how we attempted to solve them with This Is My Jam so far, because it's really only been out there for like a couple of months. So let's get going here. So I want to talk about this more faster problem first, because a lot of what I've worked on, and a lot of what I think probably you have been working on too, and what I've been seeing work on, is this sort of trend towards more stuff faster. And what I'm really talking about here is these sort of like rapidly spreading and also rapidly vanishing data trails, and these real-time feeds of stuff that's like falling off and disappearing somewhere really quickly. And you know, if you think back about 5 years, this kind of thing didn't really exist. Like, we didn't live our lives like this at all. This is a relatively new thing, and like, why are we doing it? And why is this a system that we're living in today? I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that it was just possible all of a sudden. Like, technically, we could actually solve these challenges, and it was a really interesting challenge to solve. And so we did it. But I have to wonder if this is always the best thing for everything, you know? And in particular, what I'm thinking about here is music. So I'm going to pick on these feeds for a second here, because these really bother me. And this is an example of one of these sort of rapidly vanishing data trails, real-time stuff that's just falling off the bottom, and it's a very flat hierarchy. There's no way of like giving any kind of special importance to one thing or another. Each piece of data in here has the exact same level of importance as everything else, unless there's an algorithm doing some stuff to decide what you want to see, and there's a whole other ball of wax in there too, right? So, I mean, the advantages of something like this are like, okay, maybe it makes you feel like you're not alone, you know, that's cool, you know, like there's other people out there that are listening to stuff. And you might glean some ambient news from this, but there's really no way of saying like, this thing is really important to me right now, guys. And not only this, but I also think that I saw this trend towards like spreading culture around as opposed to making it with this sort of more faster thing. And about the time that I left Last.fm, I was really deeply concerned about this, because I saw a lot of systems being built where it was like all about putting more stuff out there and spreading it around, but none of them were super focused on the whole idea of like making something, like creating stuff and placing a lot of importance on that thing you make or the thing that you curate. And even the few services that did try and hint towards this sort of limited my self-expression to like a set of form fields, like for me to type a few words into, and then like that would be figured out by a computer, like how I could express myself. And this really bothered me as well. And I started thinking about sort of like the last time that I saw something that not only really revolutionized self-expression within music, but just digital culture in general. And it looked a little something like this. So you guys probably remember this, right? We're going back in time today. So this is like MySpace circa 2006, you know, the golden days of MySpace. And I think that this is really fascinating, because there was all sorts of forms of new music that came out of MySpace. There was pop stars that were born, Lily Allen, of course, you know, prime example. But there was also a whole new design aesthetics that came out of this. There was lots of really, really interesting stuff. And it gave people sort of a place where they could play, and the framework was loose enough that they could express themselves. And so what's today's equivalent of this, oh my god, I have to tell my friends about this track right now thing? And I see people posting YouTube videos on Facebook, and I kind of wonder, like, really, is this all we've got today? Like, this seems like we've kind of gone backwards. Because not only is it hard to kind of say why these things are important to you, but when you finally get to YouTube and follow that trail, it's sort of a dead end for self-expression. Now you're just on YouTube, you're not like in that person's realm anymore. Around the same time, Instagram was quickly becoming like my favorite social network, actually. And people were making things on it. This was really interesting. Even if it's just like adding a filter and writing a caption, they were like really making stuff. And it was slow, and it was delightful, and it was this very one-at-a-time thing. And also, there was something about the way that feed, everything in it felt kind of special for some reason. I can't exactly put my finger on why, but that's something that I started thinking about a lot. And I was like, if a song can be as special as a photo, right? If not more. And it was actually around this time that my old colleague at Last FM, Matthew Ogle, came to me and sort of pitched this idea of This Is My Jam, and that's kind of how that got started. So let's talk about This Is My Jam. How many of you are familiar with the service? Okay, most of you. That's nice. That's great. Wow, I feel flattered. So it's a way to share your current favorite track, like not just what you're listening to, but like this is the one that I love, guys. You have to listen to this thing. And then you get an ever-changing list of songs from all your friends as well. So it's sort of like an ambient playlist that is always changing. We started off in private beta last year in November and opened up into public beta February of this year. And we just recently crossed 300,000 jams posted. So the first thing that we really explored with This Is My Jam is constraints. So getting back to some of those problems I was talking about. Constraints are really interesting. They could create very interesting network effects, and all of you as designers also probably know that like the worst possible thing to hear when you're starting a project is like, oh, just do whatever you want. Because you're like, I need some kind of like framework or constraint to work within. So the constraint that we have is one song at a time. And that song only lasts, you can post it for as long as 7 days. And so explaining constraints to a user is a challenge, and because at first it can really sound limiting. So we designed our initial flow to get people posting a track first, and then sort of trying to explain the constraints after that, like, hey, this is sort of how the system works. And just sort of helping them to discover and understand this. And this seems to work so far because over 72% of users that join post a track right away, which is pretty cool, I think, so it's sort of working. We were really worried that people would hate this, and we were really worried that we would get a lot of negative feedback, like, I can't believe you guys are letting me do this, but surprisingly, we received very little negative feedback, actually, about this limitation, and even when we do, it tends to be like, oh, I want to post this whole album because it's just all so good, so I think that's cool. Limitations sort of force us to think about quality. Because you only get one jam, you have to think carefully about which one it's going to be, which means that this playlist that you get from your friends is very hand-picked and very considered, and you know that it's a quality playlist. And like something, I'm paraphrasing this, but a user once said to me, they were like, the best thing about it is that you get this playlist of songs from your friends, and you know that they're not just like throwaway links, like just something that someone might put out there, but something that they really carefully considered because it's like quite a big deal to put this up there. And so yeah, this is just some of the user testimonials that we've seen about this. So this is what the playlist looks like on your homepage at the moment. So you can see down there on the left, these are all the sort of jams that are coming in from your friends. And quality sort of really brings meaning. You get this really curated playlist from people that you respect, and it becomes a lot more meaningful to you, I think. For those of you who are familiar with Last FM Friends Radio, one thing that I often encountered there when I was user testing it back in the day was I would show it to people, and then they would talk about how much they wanted to know, like, why their friends listened to these songs, and like, why were they in there, and how come there was not enough context. And unfortunately, that just wasn't something that really fitted into the framework of that service, but I think it's something that we can really exploit here, and it's really interesting to see how people use it. And the other thing about this is that we can sort of like beat this, I've heard it called newsification of content by Maria Popova. It's like this idea that because we're always putting stuff into real-time feeds, it's only the new stuff is sort of perceived as better, and so it floats to the top and the old stuff kind of falls off the bottom. But actually, something that's really interesting here is that, like, if you look at those popular jams there, you know, a lot of these photos are black and white. They're old songs. It's old music that's being jammed because it's about that quality thing, and it's not necessarily just about what's new right now. I want to talk about keeping the quality high for a second, because the really interesting challenge that we've discovered is that because we're trying to create a music network and not a social network, we have to try and sort of like help people not to follow everyone or just necessarily follow their friends on Twitter, and to try and encourage them that they should be pruning this list and keeping the quality high so it's music that they enjoy. So just up here is an example of like the email that you get when someone's following you, and you'll notice it says like, don't feel like you have to follow them back, guys. And on these follow buttons and the unfollow buttons, we've added these little bits of messaging to kind of help people understand like, hey, it's totally fine if you don't want to follow this person, that's completely okay. And I've actually responded to like user feedback emails as well, where they've been like, hey, people are putting things in my feed and I don't like it, and I'm friends with them in real life and I don't want to unfollow them, and I'm like, maybe you should. So this is actually a really interesting problem that I've never had to deal with before, and it's totally in opposition to this more faster thing, follow more people, get more people in your network, because it's actually about keeping the quality high, and so we're trying to create a little bit of resistance there, but I think people are sort of starting to get it. And the last problem that we try to solve for is slowness. So, because, when you get less stuff less often, the hope is that you have a little bit more time to enjoy it. And so on This Is My Jam, users can leave their jam active for up to a week, but the average time that people keep a jam up for is actually around 3 days. So I think this is really interesting because it means that I think a week is probably about the right scale for a jam. And so let's talk about why this is so important. I think that it works within the natural pace of music discovery. Like, this is not something that can be fast, and nor should it be fast, because people can really only absorb so much new music at one time. It's a bit like eating, like you can only eat so much food. And it also takes around like 2.5 minutes to listen to a track. That's what the average length of a pop song is. So this is one of the reasons that we've omitted a seek function on our player. We sort of feel that like if someone's posted this song, you should really take 2.5 minutes to just like listen to it. And then also a lot of people are really ritualistic about music as well. I noticed this when I was working at Last.fm. People would sort of check their charts on a weekly basis, or they'd have one day a week that they listened to new music or they did certain things. So it's an arbitrary time scale, but it's at least a time scale that people are attuned to. And I think this whole idea of scale is a really important thing that we need to consider when we're building social and web applications, because what does the right scale mean, what does the right scale feel like is a really big question. The same way it can be like a physical question about walking into a building and the scale there, or the scale of this versus my laptop, and does it make sense to have the app on here and on there, and what feels right. Time is another really important scale that we need to take into consideration, because not everything is better faster. Thank you very much. Now it's time for some questions.
Yeah. You're saying it's not really about sort of following your friends, it's about following other people. What have you put in place to help people discover those other people that they should be following?
Yeah, so that's actually something that we're working on a lot right now, is the whole discovery piece, because it's still pretty new, but you kind of have to get people using it first, and then once you've got enough people using it, then it's like, quick, we need to help them to discover each other. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. But one of the sort of key design principles we use is that the way people are represented on the site is always through their music, because it's a music network first and foremost, and we think that that's like an important way for you to discover other people. So it's not really just about following your friends in real life or whatever, it's really about following people's music taste. Like if I could, I would make those buttons say something like, follow this person's music, but that just sounds ridiculous, so they don't, but that's the idea, yeah. So there's a popular page of jams, which people seem to be pretty into, and then there's sort of random stuff. And then what we're currently working on right now is like building out the archives of everybody's past jams and past likes, and I think that will be a really interesting discovery tool too. Yeah? Green sweater over there? White?
Yeah, gray, whatever.
Something?
It's the light. You mentioned in the beginning that you kind of dislike this whole kind of like spreading stuff around without really adding something to it.
Yeah.
How afraid were you to add that kind of like re-jam
button?
Kind of
Yeah, there were a lot of heated debates about that button. So something that we really didn't want to happen was the sort of like Tumblr effect of people posting things where it's really hard to trace it back to the original trail. That bothers me intensely because like there's so much lack of attribution on Tumblr, and there's a lot of people who do create stuff, you know, it's like the, you know, the 1% or whatever, and they just don't get attributed for it because people strip it out, or like it just doesn't, sort of vanishes from the sort of Tumblr ecosystem. So something that we've done is hopefully created a way that attribution is maintained from the jam, so you can always see the original person that posted it and then the person that you got it from directly. So there's a from and a by attribution. But it's been interesting. Like some of the older users, when we first launched it, were like, oh, I don't know if I want people like taking my thing. Like I put so much time into this. But they sort of quickly got over themselves, and yeah, so far it hasn't been like used a ton yet, but it's really early days, so it's kind of be interesting to see. My hope is that it will be something that will sort of like reduce the barrier of entry for new users that are coming into the service and they're like, oh, I'm not exactly sure how this works yet. It's much easier to just hit a rejam button than to like post your own jam.
Because you just mentioned, what's your age distribution on this?
We don't know yet, but I'm guessing it's probably sort of people our age and a bit younger.
You know how Tumblr has tumbleweed, and in YouTube you can have watch later attributes. All those kind of ways to maybe not watch something immediately or not post something immediately, but you want to somehow say that it is of quality.
Yeah.
Do you think that there would be room for spacing the posts that you made on Jam, or is there a way that you can somehow keep something safe but not make it public on your profile?
So I think, I'm not sure, is it maybe two questions there? So like one is if you want to just post it but not to the world, is that the one question?
Yeah, if you want to kind of collect them things and save them so you have your own personal
So you have like a
trail,
queue.
but so that you don't necessarily have to say to the whole world, this is my jam right now.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I mean, a lot of people have asked us for some kind of queue where you can kind of collect stuff into it, and then when you do want to make it public, you can just sort of hit a button and it can go out there. So that's probably something that I think we'll look into. The sort of whole idea of a private profile doesn't exist yet, but I imagine that's something that we're going to have to think about pretty soon because, you know, people like privacy on the internet. So. Yeah, I mean, the idea of like just keeping it for yourself and not sharing it is an interesting one, and I'm really I've always wanted a bit of a listen later service, so I have a selfish interest in that. But I think that like at the moment, the focus here is like sharing this track with your friends. Like most people, when they find something that they like really love, music-wise, they want to tell people about it. So, but yeah, there's some interesting stuff there to dig into. You first.
Have you had any response or communication from, say, the music industry?
A little bit. It's been pretty positive, actually. We've had a number of artists sign up and use the site to either promote their own work or just to sort of like talk about stuff that they think is really cool, which is really interesting. And a couple of indie record labels as well, and like some of them even said like, hey, we'd love to like, you know, get our music on here, but like, we don't even have a system for that yet. But yeah, like so far, early days, it's, positive.
Considering you're going for quality rather than quantity, how do you think that has affected your time on site?
Well, I think that it means everything happens a lot slower. Like, I mean, if people are posting stuff over 3 days, that's like way slower than the time that it would take you to like tweet something. Or in terms of size, we sort of have yet to see how that will affect things. But my hope is that people want something a little bit slower. Yeah.
You spoke about how important it is to have it like handpicked. Could you ever imagine it being like autonomous or automatic?
No, because I spent a long time working on that problem, and I think that the best recommendations come from friends. I think there are ways that you can use like algorithms and computers and stuff to kind of connect people up together, or maybe create insights or stories that otherwise might have not been there. But I think the key thing about this is the curatorial aspect of it, and that it is all handpicked. Yeah.
I think I heard that you guys were developing an iPhone app. How do you think that will affect the sort of speed of
discovery and enjoyment of this modality?
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting question. So yeah, that's something we're starting on pretty soon. And it might speed it up. Like, I think it would be really neat to sort of start taking advantage of context in situations where you're like in a cafe and you hear this awesome song and you're like, oh wow, it's this, right? Or you're at a concert or a festival and you're like, guys, this is the one right here. Or even something like a bit more like, what is this? It's amazing. Ability, like some kind of way to figure out what that track is and then post it as your jam. So yeah, I think it could maybe speed it up, but I'm, I guess, more interested in sort of like the contextual aspect of it. Yeah, I think that's it for questions. But I'm going to be around afterwards for drinks, so if you guys have any more questions, I'd really, really love to hear that and any other feedback you might have too. Thank you.